All right, good morning, everyone. I imagine we may have a couple more people come in, but go ahead and get started since we only have 30 minutes today. So we are going to actually change course a little bit today. I know we have a few people out, so we may have a small group, but I think we can still have a really good discussion. Hannah had asked me to focus this month's time on talking about the career pathways that she has shared about over the last several months, and happy to do a refresher on that for anybody that would be beneficial. But basically her ask is talking about, now that career pathway is really moving forward, as well as a lot of other efforts to really recognize differences in provider qualifications across the early childhood workforce. How can we get that information to families in a way that's meaningful and help them think about what are the types of questions you might want to be asking of providers that are working with you and your family? So I'm going to put the Jamboard link here in the chat, and then I'll share my screen. We have a few questions to respond to. So I know it's a different conversation this time, but hopefully we'll kind of build on our conversations about helping families get the information they need. So, okay. Does everybody feel like they know enough about the career pathway, or is it helpful to do a refresher?
I don't know about others. This is Nikki. I feel like I know enough.
Okay. I mean, essentially, it is an effort to kind of help formalize different levels of qualifications, different levels of experience, education, credentials, things like that. And so it's not that families may not have been asking those questions before, but I think they're being very intentional as they're planning through 2023 about how to get the word out, and really want to think about, like, what does that look like for conversations with families. So here are the questions for us to work through. We'll go till 10:55, so we've got about 25 minutes, and feel free to come off mute or just kind of add. I think the yellow and blue questions here, I think, kind of go hand in hand, but how can we use the career pathway for early childhood providers to inform parent family choice? And then what kinds of information do you think families would like to know about providers? That could be, what level of education they have, that could be their experience, skill sets, and how can that be, like, meaningful and digestible for families? Any thoughts?
Can I start? Like, my initial thought is, the career pathway is really about those individual staff. And so when you're talking about choices that a family might make for their children, it's really a lot of times, yes, they might look at the qualifications of the individuals that are caring directly for their children, but they look at the facility as a whole typically, right? So I think that the career pathway really would help more with our home-based or family child care decision making. I think in centers it's almost a whole different conversation, because you'd have to be looking at, like, the majority of their staff, where are they at, and you're looking at a larger picture.
I think that's a great distinction.
I don't know if others. Another thing that I'm thinking just initially is, a lot of families rely on childcare to help them to make decisions about childcare providers. And there are a lot of things that a childcare provider puts into their profile that are just self-reported, self-attestations about different types of qualifications and stuff. And so this would be something that is verified,
Mhm.
that they're at a certain level and it's been verified. I mean, I assume there will be, that they will meet a certain level of the pathway, and then they can advertise that.
Yeah, so really emphasizing like who's doing the quality control and that information. Got knowledge of background and diversity connected to diverse families. That's a great one. Doctors' offices, early childhood centers, daycare centers, parents as teachers, birth to programs, absolutely. Similar behavior management styles and nurturing ideas. So kind of their approach as well as their, documented skills and qualifications. Yep, aligning with childcare aware, of course.
So for me, it gets a little tricky when we talk about the pathway versus the information that would be in the registry, So when we're talking about what types of information do you think they'd like to know about providers, I feel like in the registry, they're going to have information about different trainings perhaps that they've taken. So that this individual has had training, we'll just say for children with special health conditions.
Mhm.
Like they'll actually have that level of detail. And because I don't really see that as part of the pathway so much as the registry.
I think that's a good distinction. I would say let's just think about kind of all the different workforce initiatives that are going on. Because I think the specific ask was around career pathways, but there I think are going to be a lot of conversations about just what are all the things that families need to know and how can that sort of be broken out, wherever it fits. But yeah, I think to me the registry goes hand in hand with this. So I think it makes sense to just think about like, we know that there's going to be more accessible and verified information about providers. And so what should be accessible to families? What should they be asking? But yeah, I think you highlighting like training for special healthcare needs is absolutely one.
Is there a document that is available to families that gives them some ideas about what you should ask? Because if you're brand new to this world, you might not know, like, what should I be asking? No one will ever love your child the way that you love your child, but you want to probably find someone who is compatible and will kind of follow your same ideas, or I don't know how to say that, but and there could be something created. I don't know, because I never had, by the time we moved here, I never had to look for childcare in the state of Kansas. So
that does exist. That's part of what Child Care Aware does, is provide that kind of information. But you're right, including information that they could look or ask questions about the career pathway in that because right now, it's a search of the different things that families should think about when they're looking for a child care provider, different things they should look at when they do those site visits, but making sure they include, these are some more questions they can ask once we have this up in place.
I think it's important to add for families ways that they can get on this path. That is one of our greatest recruitments into this field, is families that we work with, then wanting to become providers or early educators.
I agree. I think that would be really, really important.
So I could see, like at DCF, right? For example, we have employment services. They haven't really steered the people that receive cash assistance towards child care, providing care, because of what we all know about the pay levels, and they want the families to be, self-sufficient and have enough earning that they're able to at least meet the living requirements they have, right? So have a living wage. But if we were ever able to address the living wage question, if we ever had enough, I believe, universal federal funding, or something to make it a career path that would be desirable, I think that there's employment services, you have the workforce agencies that help people that are out of work look for work and make sure that they're aware of this pathway exists so that people can work through it. The other thing about the pathway is that it does show a path towards higher earning potential that people might not have realized, that, there are different areas of early childhood that might pay them a living wage but the experience they gain from being a provider or kind of the more entry level positions kind of works their way up through that pathway. But there are areas where they could earn a living wage.
So is the information available to parents in a language other than English? I know Child Care Aware has they have some Spanish materials, but I know in Western Kansas that there's a lot of different languages that are happening out there.
I don't know the answer to that. My guess is some probably are, but I think it's a really good opportunity to look at what else could be done and make sure that materials that are in any language are up to date with this information. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point.
I do know we don't, like when you go out and look for this kind of information, you don't find it already created in a lot of different languages. I mean, I do believe that sometimes we're able to find Spanish, right? So it does seem that most of it has to be especially developed for a targeted audience.
And at a reading level that people will understand. Because I know, just like with the Parent Leadership Conference, we do a lot of materials in Spanish. And even though some of our families only speak Spanish, they don't necessarily want the materials in Spanish because they don't read that. And we try to produce those at probably a 5th to 6th grade reading level, but lots of times we have families that just don't read well. And that goes for our families that speak English at all as well. One conference, somebody, a keynote had a bunch of parents up on the stage and then asked people to read things. And you could just see the fear in some people's eyes, because we forget that they don't always read at the level that the rest, that most people read at. So.
Well, and I think in language that, is kind of just every day for families. I think this in this field, like in a lot of fields, it can get easy to use terms that we may hear all the time, but that may not mean anything to families.
An important piece would be for families to be able to have an easy link to a heat map to,
Yep.
are these professionals even available to them?
Yes.
That's a great idea.
I think I'd want to talk a little bit more about that heat map concept, right? So, I mean, we're talking about the career pathway being all the different early childhood fields and everything eventually. I think right now we focused on the child care providers and child care staff, and that makes sense for that. But I don't think it makes sense when you talk about what the career pathway is going to be like, right? I mean, it doesn't make that much sense. The number of different directors and stuff like that, it couldn't possibly make sense for a heat map, but on a statewide policy making, there's a lot more probably in the Topeka area for government and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And it would have to be probably some sort of percentage, because you don't have as many people out west probably that are going to meet the different qualification. It does. I don't know. Can you guys talk a little bit more about what you're thinking for a heat map?
I'm thinking if you use the child care provider thing, child care where it does have this map out that, like, I'm in Miami County, and if I want to look for a in-home family child care provider, I know there's only 12. So is this even something I need to look into, or do I need to look into, what the benefits to my family would be and to going to a center-based care because there's more openings there? And then the same for home visiting is, do we have healthy families, or do we have parents as teachers? Do we have early Head Start? And what are the credentials that go with each one of those? I think families would want to know.
So it sounds like you're talking more about services available, not necessarily about the different levels of the career pathway that those service providers are at.
So like home visiting, for parents as teachers, it is required to have a bachelor's degree. So if you're on the career pathway and you see, I want a home visitor that, I have a PhD, I want somebody that at least has a bachelor's degree, you'd see that these different models require whatever level on the pathway it is. Well, too bad, because you don't have that program in your area. So consider what other education or enrichment PD opportunities are important to you. Like you were saying, this one may not have a bachelor's degree, but they've received extra training in children with special needs, and that's important to my family.
So if you're looking at it, like if you're looking at a home childcare, you would be able to see what kind of where that home provider was on that career pathway, and that would help you to know, that they have a good knowledge of special healthcare needs, or they have a good knowledge of infant mental health. Is that kind of what you mean, Callie?
Yeah, and I don't know how that works in a map. Like, can you tie the pathway into a map where all of those professionals show up and you can see it from the professionals instead of the programs?
I don't know.
And it makes me think about the filtering you can do, when you're searching for a childcare, you could filter for somebody that is enrolled with DCF right now. You can filter for somebody that has experience. If you're looking for experience with a child with autism, or like right now they can filter in their search, and that's what makes me think of. I'm just not sure about how a heat map would work, but somebody smarter can figure it out probably.
Yeah, that is not the case for like early learning home visiting programs. It's very difficult to navigate how to find them. That's why we love 1-800-CHILDREN, is because there's somebody there that can help them navigate. So like parents as teachers, navigation is tied to the zip code of the home base of the program. And we have lots of consortiums. So unless you know that you need to be looking at Paola, Kansas to enroll in parents as teachers, and you live in Mound City, Kansas, you need somebody to help you navigate that. It's not easy to find.
And I know from just conversations this last week that not all of even the home visiting programs are in 1-800-CHILDREN yet. Some are still struggling to get added to it.
Michelle, if you know who those are exactly, can you either send them to me, or you can send them to me and I will.
Yeah.
It kind of almost becomes a situation where, like, you can provide people so much information that then at some point they are overwhelmed, and either at that point they will pick up the phone and call someone, or they will just be like, this is too much, I can't do it. And I think that we kind of have to find that fine line for families. Because when I think of the families that we work with, for a lot of this, it's too much information. And so, like, our crisis nursery case manager works very closely with Child Care Aware here in Sedgwick County, in helping families find childcare when they are done, when we close our case in crisis nursery. And I mean, I guess it kind of just depends on where that family is. Are they in a crisis situation? Although I feel like if you're looking for childcare right now, regardless of anything else in your life, you probably feel like you're in a crisis situation because it's so hard to get. And so I think we have to figure out the balance there, and the way that you don't have to do every single step. If you find, okay, here I am, I found childcare in my zip code. It's licensed childcare. They'll take my DCF funds, and that's really all I need to know at this point. Or if you need to know more. And that could just be Christmas brain talking, because my brain is overwhelmed with like end of the year and work and Christmas at this point.
So maybe it's like almost like tiers of information, or kind of like if you're at this stage, like, so that maybe not everything's on one document, but there's sort of different materials that could be given to families based on kind of where they are.
Maybe. I'm not familiar enough with how all the searches work to know. So, and it could be that way already, and I just don't know because I'm not familiar enough with it.
So, like with Child Care Aware, they can call and then they can get tailored searches. They can talk to them about what kind of like 1-800-CHILDREN, right? Like, what is exactly are you looking for? What's your priority and all that? But to be honest, most of the families what they've told us is that a lot of the families that they've talked to are in an urgent situation where they're really just looking for somebody who has an open slot,
Yeah.
to be honest, and that they can afford. Well, and
So
I guess
maybe
that's part of this whole, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking maybe that's part of this whole career pathway is like we've always known, I think, that there's not, unless there's pay tied to it or something, there's not a whole lot of incentive for participation. But the concept behind having families drive a desire for higher level of education would be wonderful, if it was driven by the market. But I don't feel like that realistically would happen. So that's part of the communication with the families, is to try to get them behind it enough to help drive providers to want to increase on the career pathway, I would think.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So it's educating the families about what they should be looking for and what is that kind of what
So
Well,
you have to
Sorry.
take whatever provider you can get, because you need
Right.
that slot, you need that childcare tomorrow. When you get there, you wish they had been further on the pathway. You wish they would have got other trainings on there. So you as a family can say, I'm familiar with these pathway opportunities. Would you be willing to take these trainings, do these things?
That's a really good point. Like they could push them to take it instead of trying to search for somebody who's already at a certain level too. Yeah, that they could be the drivers, but part of it would be us helping to educate parents in a way they understand about the importance of, I mean, we can't say for sure that like a person at this level in the pathway is better than a person at this level in the pathway per se. But what is it that we think, why do we think this is so important? And we know there is some research behind having the additional training and the additional education that supports the child development. So things like that being shared in a way that makes perfect sense to families is challenging, but that would have to be the type of information that would help probably drive them to talk to their provider about increasing their skills, because they wouldn't necessarily have to remain licensed.
Yeah, and I think that goes back into the crossover between the registry and the pathway, is that by being part of the registry, you're going to know what those opportunities are, especially that already have funding behind them that would advance you on the pathway.
Okay, I'm going to stop us there because we are due back in the main room. This is a great conversation. Thank you for being willing to pivot. I will share a little bit with our report out, and I will kind of see where this conversation wants to go in the future. And yeah, thank you all for your conversation today. Happy holidays to everybody.